Welcome to the Navik Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Navik's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.navik.co. This episode is brought to you by Lightspeed Venture Partners. Lightspeed is a globally leading venture capital firm with over $29 billion in capital under management and more than 500 investments across the US, Europe, and Asia. With its dedicated gaming practice, Lightspeed Gaming, the firm is investing from over $7 billion in early and growth stage capital, making it by far the largest fund focused on gaming and interactive technology. Lightspeed's team combines deep expertise in gaming with a global multi-stage investment platform and a culture that truly puts founders first. Selected investments include Epic Games, Snap, and Stability AI, as well as game designers and producers who led the creation of titles like Fortnite, Call of Duty, League of Legends, Valorant, StarCraft 2, and many more. For more information, simply go to gaming.lsvp.com or check out the details in the show notes. And with that, let's jump into the episode.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Navik Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and this is the interview and insight segment. Hello, 2026. I hope everybody had an amazing holiday and a happy new year. I'm back in the studio and kicking off with what I hope is another great year of content in the business of games, content, and interactive tech. Today, we are talking PC. As the global gaming market reached 197 million in 2025, PC was forecasted to contribute 43 billion of that 200 billion, up 10% year over year from 2024. But we're not going to talk about the traditional PC market, but rather its sort of underground twin, the PC gray market. And in the past, the gray market used to be a retail-dominated land. Hopefully, as a listener, you're old enough that you remember heading to Blockbuster or GameStop and buying a used copy of a video game. But in the digital world, the gray market has become even more vast and is ostensibly not a physical place, but rather a concept of reselling in general. Whether or not it's authorized or not is something that we'll discuss today. Gray market sites like G2A and Green Man Gaming aggregate keys from a variety of sources, primarily benefiting from regional price arbitrage, i.e. buying keys from cheaper countries and reselling them in more premier markets, even though this can be done during promotional periods or as fraudulent purchases. For the publisher and the developer, this is clearly disadvantageous. Regional pricing is meant to benefit the in-region consumer whose wallet size and spending power might be lower based on currency strength or other basket of consumer goods conditions. A gray market site buying up a key and then selling it in a more premium market benefits the gray market versus putting that money in the developer or publisher's pocket. So today we're going to talk more in depth about the PC gray market. How big is this problem actually? Who is it affecting the most? The history of the gray market from evolution to retail to digital, and solution providers that are tackling this problem. My guest today is Vadim Andreev, the CEO of Rokky. Rokky is a global digital gaming distribution platform that connects publishers and with digital storefronts with all over the world, streamlining the sale of game keys and combating the gray market. The goal is to protect publishers from gray market exploitation while also facilitating sales. Vadim, prior to founding Rokky, founded a company in the cloud gaming solution space called PlayKey, which he sold to Mail.ru. Vadim and I connected several months ago, and it's 2025 now, and this episode has been a long time coming. So, Vadim, welcome to the pod. How are you doing?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me today. It's a great pleasure to be here and to talk about the market. First of all, so a bit of myself. So I'm in this business since 2009, and I did see how this industry develops. And when you said about the gray market, like G2A and Green Man Gaming, so I would say I do not consider Green Man Gaming as a gray market, but we will talk about this later today. And I think we'll be able to draw the line between the gray market, which is the gray market exactly, and which is not. So we are doing the digital distribution. We help publishers to sell their games across all over the world, especially in the hard-to-reach regions like China. And we are trying to protect them from the gray market. And today, I'm happy to discuss this because in the industry, usually people do not speak about the gray market like loudly. So today we'll try to speak about this absolutely transparent and everything what we can say.
Okay, I got it. We'll speak about it very loudly. That is, as it is, of course, the topic of our entire discussion. But so thank you for sharing a little bit about background about like why, how you started. But I just actually have more of a personal question before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of our episode. Like, why are you specifically passionate about solving the gray market for devs and publishers?
We see so when we work with partners and when we work in the digital distribution, we understand that we very often compete with the gray market, and we understand that we need to fix this issue to grow faster, and we understand that there is a problem, big problems of publishers who struggling with the revenue and because of the gray market. So we know how to fix it. We know how to fix it, and we just want to show publishers that that's not an issue at all. So that's you can handle it. So we can face the problem, and you can tackle it and work
I
with
got
that.
it. Okay. God, I was curious if there was any kind of underlying when I was a kid or I launched a game studio and people robbed me of 1,000 keys. And so now I'm on this mission to rectify this problem. But it sounds like for you, it's
Yeah,
just like you.
when I was a kid, I used the pirated version of the game. So as everyone used this because we just didn't have an option. You didn't know how to buy the real game, so there was an option of
Absolutely.
pirated games. Yeah,
Absolutely, yeah, and it's really interesting. I think a lot of markets like Poland and even like the origins of CD Projekt is mostly in pirating and like porting
yeah.
games over to let a market access them in the first place. And so I think what we're talking about today is a lot of publishers have and studios have tried to make their games more accessible to regions that typically weren't able to access them through a variety of storefronts. But that in itself is also creating another problem around the gray market, which of course we'll talk about today. But before we start talking about the nuts and bolts of Rokky and the current PC gray market, I kind of want to understand a little bit more where it comes from. What can you kind of tell me about the retail PC gaming market from like the 80s and the 90s? And sort of like how has that evolved into the digital gray market versus the retail game market? And what makes it kind of a better or worse business to be in?
Yeah, so if you go back to 90s or early to 2000s, so PC games like were almost entirely physical products. They were sold on CD-ROMs before that on floppy disks, but just skip it. So CD-ROMs and the piracy was basically everywhere. As I said, when I was a kid, I could not uh, buy like legit copy of the game, so I could only buy the pirated version of the game, and I didn't care honestly. So in that time, but anyway, so disc burnings, copied CDs, secondhand resale. So that was really common that time. And I guess to fight this, publishers decided to create some kind of unique activation codes, which were printed on the back of the manual of the game of the box, and you had to type it in when you install the game and start playing. So the fun fact is we still use activation codes. After
Mm-hmm.
30 years, after 30 years, so we still use activation codes, and we still sell activation codes. Um, yeah, so that time when internet developed, more and more people started to use online websites, and they realized that there was a chance to get some money, get some revenue. They could buy lots of boxes, open those boxes, take a picture of the code, and resell just the code, just the picture. Sometimes even they didn't type the code. So sometimes they just try to resell the photo of the code, not the exact code. And of course, so that's I think where the gray market started, like in digital. And the other issue was when so the biggest issue was when someone could buy this code, this box in Brazil and resell in Germany or in the US. So in this case, publisher just lose money, and all of those money comes to another pockets. So
Right.
that was an issue.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's I think what you're calling back to is like, hey, even though this was a retail market, it wasn't like, we graduated from the CD-ROMs and the floppy disks pretty quickly, and we were still doing codes. And so, like, I think that there's a level of the gray market that has to do with physical manufactured goods, and we'll talk a little bit about like, I know there's been some legal cases that have, Supreme Court cases about once a manufacturer sells something, they kind of lose control over its resale. But we'll get to in a second. But I think it's a really interesting point to say that like, hey, there were still codes. They just happened to be printed on physical boxes, and people were just taking photos of them and selling that. And so, for the publisher or the developer, do you think that now that we're very much in this digital gray market, that's not a physical codes printed on a thing, do you think that's an easier beast to deal with or a harder beast to deal with when it comes to the developer or the publisher side in terms of trying to regulate that? Like, has the problem gotten harder for people to take on now versus then?
Um, it's easier. So okay, so right now everything's digital. So if you talk about the uh, classic retail, physical retail. So how
Mhm.
to resell the box from one region to another region? So you had to deliver it to from one region to another region. With the digital space, of course, it's easier. So you can just buy the game and resell it. So of course, it's easier, and the problem is bigger than it was before. But I guess it's easier to handle it because all of
Mhm.
those codes can resell through technical solutions, and there are lots of technical companies like Rokky, like others, who have technical APIs, who have technical solutions, dashboards, etc. So, and we can control it. So we just need to show the publishers how to control it.
Okay. Yeah, I think what I guess the root of the question was it's obviously easier for the gray market actors to sell digital than it was retail because they're literally not moving around physical goods. But you're also saying that it's easier for developers and studios to federate and regulate digital products than it was to regulate physical goods. So although the problem has gotten bigger, the solutions have gotten easier in some regard is sort of what you're saying. Um, and actually, when we kicked off, I mentioned Green Man Gaming Group, and you had said that they're not really gray market. And I actually had a question about this here because I think even myself might not really understand like it's gray, right? Obviously, but there are some that are very like legit. They pursue partnerships with gaming companies, like a company like Humble Bundle, kind of had its roots in some sort of bundling arbitrage, but now they are like a very much formalized partnership to the game industry, especially for indie and double A titles. So, what are some of the big alternative distribution sellers? And for you, what delineates like gray from something like a Humble Bundle or maybe a Green Man Gaming, which is obviously key resellers versus gray market sellers?
Yeah. So you mentioned that lots of people in the industry, they consider the alternative distribution like a gray market reselling market, but actually it's not, and so that's a big mistake for the industry. And I would say, um, so usually industry consider like there is a authorized alternative distribution, like agreement gaming is the authorized place to distribute games, and unauthorized distribution spaces. But honestly, I believe there's another line. So first of all,
Okay.
we need to understand that the gray market, that's not a specific place, and that's a concept, that's an economic behavior. So, and if you face this concept, if you face these issues, and if you tackle them, so you can fix those gaps, so you can fix those problems, and you can work everywhere, especially like on marketplaces like G2A, and everyone in the industry, almost everyone in the industry, they consider G2A as a gray market place. But if you fix those gaps, if you face those issues, if you fix it, so G2A doesn't, so it wouldn't be like a gray market reseller. So that would be a place with the customers who will buy your game, who will get you revenue. So I would say we need to understand that the gray market is my point is the gray market is not the exact place. That's a concept. And we need to change the concept.
Okay. So I'm going to push a little here because I think I'm having a hard time kind of understanding what the because I guess it's a concept, and the concept is I buy low, I sell high, and I'm not supposed to do that, and I'm doing it in an unauthorized manner, right? But in order to build an actual business around that, you have to be a place to some extent, or like if you wanted to do it at scale, right? I could totally do this, right? I could go on a trip to Sao Paulo for break and buy some Steam keys there, and then sell them again. And obviously, I do that as a one single consumer. Can't do that at scale, right? And so, you mentioned that some of these people are authorized, but aren't they also still doing the same thing? Aren't they buying game keys from low price regions and selling them to premium customers that just happen to be authorized to do so? And so is that not still the same impact for the developer in the studio, which is we're losing you're basically like we had these keys and then you're taking a cut in the middle that theoretically should have gone to me if the unit was sold in the premier market.
Um, I mean, if you just close the G2A, for example, if you just close the website like G2A,
Yeah.
so what will happen next? So people will resell those codes on Telegram, or they'll sell those codes anywhere else, like in Instagram, everywhere. So if you so let's go back to retail market and let's take a look at the iPhone price. So the iPhone price in the US is $10.99, and in the UK is $10.99, almost the same price. But in the US it's $10.99 US dollars. In the UK it's $10.99 GBP, which means 20% difference. So there will be actors who will go to the US, buy lots of iPhones in the US, and resell in the Great Britain. So that's how it works. So you need to work not you need to work not with the gray market reseller places. You need to work with the concept, how to prevent this.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. And I think but another question that I might push back on, and then we'll go into kind of and of course I'm having this conversation more for the sake of understanding sort of the concept and what the issue is. And then we'll kind of go into how big the problem is today, actually, in terms of revenue numbers. But what would you say to someone who said something like, well, it doesn't really matter who the first key was bought by. It was still bought. The company put it on sale or in a region. So technically they wanted to sell at that price anyway. In a case in 1988, the Supreme Court, Kmart versus Cartier, established that once a manufacturer sells something, they lose control over its resale. So I guess my argument might be is that, sure, it's the gray market, but theoretically, you had a bunch of units that you were supposed to sell at $19.99 in Brazil, and someone bought them for $19.99 in Brazil, and then they just and so sort of what's your I know what my counter to that would be, but I'm curious to what your counter will be.
If we talk about the size of the problem, so um, when we when we work with this leakages in the PC gaming market, we find out that about 20% of margin from 20%, 20 to 40% of margin or revenue of publishers comes outside of comes to resellers, comes to gray resellers. So that's because of if you let's make an example. If you buy the game in Brazil for $10, which costs $25 in Europe, so that's the difference, about 60%. But in fact, your margin is lower. So in fact, publishers lose about 25 to 35% of their margin. So, but that's significant amount of revenue when it comes to the whole distribution picture, to the whole distribution revenue of the publisher. So I would say the size is about 25% of their digital revenue.
Okay. So that was the size, but I think what I wanted to say was more of the argument, right? Which was about when you're a manufacturer and you sell something, you lose control over its resale. And so theoretically, right, a lot of these publishers, they gave They launched the game, 100 game keys. 50 of those game keys were given to Brazil. What is the issue with those 50 game keys? Why does it matter who they were bought by and why they're being resold? And I think like I have an argument for why this is negatively impactful to the publisher. But I guess in your words, why do you think that's an issue that's worth solving, since they had already said, hey, we want to sell these game keys at a lower price?
Um, Sometimes people just don't realize the real size of how many keys could be resold. Of course, if you are going to sell 500 keys and only 15 keys will be resold to another region, so that's not a big issue. But sometimes, if you cannot control it, sometimes that could be 80% of your sales or 90% of your sales. So, and you do not know about this. So, how do you know this? So, Steve doesn't provide you any statistics.
Mhm.
So, he'll provide you like statistics in general, how many keys were activated there in that region, in that region. That's it. So, and you don't know the exact numbers. And sometimes almost 80% or 90% of game sold in Europe could be like from Brazil. So
Right.
that's a problem. And honestly, so if the sale is a sale for you, it's okay, but you need to control it. If you control it, if you understand what's going on, so then you can work with that.
Yeah. And I think my answer to this would be, it's not about the keys in the low price region. It's about the customer in the other region. You basically cannibalized from them, right? So the loss comes from assuming that the Brazil keys were basically sold to people that would have bought your game at $60 in London. And I think like that's the kind of argument that I would say back to that, because it's a cannibalization problem. So net across units are the same, perhaps, but the price that they were sold at might be lower, which obviously affects your margin. And so I think it was just an interesting question and a kind of debate about where you lose control over something at resale, and or how, and at least for you, it sounds like you need to know that it's happening and you need to pursue strategies to kind of ameliorate it. But let's talk about how big the problem is today. You talked about this 25% of margin for developers and publishers. And it sounds like there are two main vulnerabilities. And I would love to talk through what those main vulnerabilities are. And the first is one that we've heavily discussed. This is regional pricing arbitrage. Publishers generate worldwide keys in low regions and then sell them in higher regions. You called that the revenue leakage. And the second one is also promotional stockpiling. So resellers buy thousands of keys during the sales promotions, and then they resell them at the higher prices when the promotions end. I have some questions kind of about like, who is the most afflicted by this problem? You know, of that revenue, is there that you said 25%, is there a pattern, console, PC, genre, size of developer that makes one more exposed? I would presume it's just the success of the title increases the magnitude of the problem. But I'm curious on those two vulnerabilities, who are the players in the space that are the most impacted by this?
Everyone, and the bigger the publisher, the bigger the problem. And yeah, so it doesn't matter which genre or game or
Okay.
so every PC game which will be released, if it is not properly controlled, so there would be an issue. So I would say the problem is really massive. It's really massive, and you mentioned two main issues, like regional arbitrage and promotion stockpiling. So that's main issues of the market, and so you need to work with that. So yeah, so you totally, yeah, I got your point, and yeah, you are totally right. So that's two main issues which need to be fixed.
Okay. And before we go to talk about Rokky and some of the strategic solutions that you guys do to help some of these, again, like you said, the bigger the publisher. So, yeah, exactly. The success of the title, the bigger the publisher magnifies the problem. What are some of the current solutions that publishers have implemented themselves, like regional locking or abandoning regional pricing altogether? And how have you seen that faring so far? This is kind of absent any of the Rokky solutions. What are publishers doing? Because I'm sure they've kind of also figured it out and are trying to do something on their own. What are they doing?
Yeah. For now, many publishers, they are doing regional locking, And that's a great solution. We always recommend we start working with publishers. When we start working with publishers, we recommend them to regional lock keys.
Okay.
Sometimes they do mistakes in regional locking and add some currencies um, into another batch of keys. But anyway, so regional lock, that's the first step. You have to start with the regional lock. There are lots of publishers and especially indie developers who just not familiar with the digital distribution. They don't understand that they need to do that, and they just resell worldwide keys all over the world in the cheapest regions, and then they are asking themselves like, what's going on with the price of the market? Why is it like $1 instead of 15?
Yeah. Why
So
is it so diluted?
so
Yeah. Yeah.
so the first step, that's the regional locking. And when we work with publishers, we usually recommend them how to properly regional lock the key, and then we recommend them how to set the price.
Okay. And are there, so again, but a publisher can do this on their own, right? They don't need Rokky to do the regional pricing necessarily. Are there any downsides of region locking? I could see there potentially being maybe a negative consumer impact, but is it like a foolproof solution, or are there some dark sides of region locking?
Um, so I would say, of course, publishers can do that by themselves, but they just don't understand why they have to do that. Let's say some publishers they add New Zealand into European batch of keys, but New Zealand will be cheaper than European keys.
Okay.
And so in this case, we will recommend the publisher just to remove New Zealand from the European batch of keys and put it into the Southeast Asian keys, or just make the specific regional lock for China, because Chinese keys are the cheapest one. And
Yes.
even if you include China into the Southeast Asia pack, so all the keys in Southeast Asia pack will be sold in China, but actually not. Yes. So,
Okay.
uh, of course, if publisher does this, this is great. This is really great. But sometimes we need to advise publishers on how to properly do that. And after they region lock the key, so which price recommendations do they use? In most cases, publisher uses the price recommendation of Steam.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And there's some
Steam,
big deltas there. Yeah.
yes, and Steam doesn't update taxes and currency exchange rates regularly all over regions.
Yeah.
And so that's why our tool, like price recommendation tool, exists, because we all the time we check taxes, we check currency exchange rates, etc., and we do recommendations for the publisher on how to slightly increase the price for some specific region to avoid the gray market. And you don't need, so if you just like region lock the key for Southeast Asia and remove China, you don't need to increase the price for some specific region like 2 times. So it's enough. It's like 3-5%. That will be enough.
Interesting. And we were definitely going to get to that actually to talk about Valve's price recommendation system. They don't really get updated. Simon at Game Discover Co. recently wrote a piece. Quote: "Does Steam have its regional pricing recommendation right?" Which is highlighting a lot of the disparities between like the indie. There was like 10 indies and 10 AA, AAA titles selling games at regional price selections that Valve recommends, and many of the indie games who are just obviously like don't have big business teams. They're just keeping the price recommendations set by Steam. But for AA and AAA, they varied quite a bit, notably in like China and Brazil. And so, we talked a little bit about, I was going to ask you a little bit about why your price recommendations are different and better than Steam. And you mentioned a couple of things like VAT tax and currency rates and exchange rates for FX control. But kind of going back to like the main pipeline of the solution of regional locking, right? It sounds like you're saying that publishers can make mistakes by lumping regions that maybe don't belong together, or removing regions that are like too dissimilar, like you said, Southeast Asia, and China, and that in general, it's not really the practice of regional locking that's bad, but it might be you have to do it and execute it in the right way. Um, and so maybe that kind of brings us to Rokky's strategy and solution. I was looking at your website. You have a variety of services that you offer publishers. In summary, I see key management systems, which obviously probably tracks the redeemed keys, the out in the wild keys, the revoked keys, a price recommendation system, which we talked about already, a promotional optimization system, which is also exciting, and China distribution, which I don't think that we'll have time for in this episode, but that's definitely a really cool thing on its own. But before we kind of get into any of those details and things like that, what of those different services did you actually start with, and what do most of your clients come to Rokky for when you begin?
So first of all, mm, we are a company who provides revenue to the publisher. So we don't only work with how to protect from the gray market. So we provide the revenue, and we provide as you've seen on our website, the China distribution gateway. So which means we provide an access to the Chinese market, which is the fastest growing market. And of course, we asked for the regional lock Chinese keys. Yes, but yeah, when it comes to Rokky and what we do. So first of all, we have the technical solution. So the technical solution, which is API with our partners. When we track the IP address of the customer, we track the ID of the customer, and we do not allow the customer from Germany to buy the game from Brazil, let's say. And we also do not allow the customer to buy uh, a bunch of keys, like 10 keys or 100 keys or 1000 keys from one IP address and using one ID or one email. So that's what we have in place with our partners. But then we also have the key management system and the dashboard for the publisher. When the publisher can track the key on all stages of the distribution. Where did the key came from? Who is the seller? Who is the customer? Where is the customer? All of the data, all of the reports online. So the publisher can track it. But that's the technical solution. And I would say there are lots of companies who has this technical solution. But this technical solution doesn't work without recommendations. And so that's why we introduced to the market our price recommendation system and promotion optimization system. Because all the technical solutions, there will always be a guy who will try to hack you. So anyway, you need to find those gaps and close those gaps with your rules, with your ideas, and use your recommendations. So as we spoke about the price recommendation system, so there's also the promotion optimization system, which helps to avoid promo stockpiling of keys. So yeah, so this system helps to do that. It's more tricky to work with that than the price recommendation system because that's not so easy to understand how it works and why it will work. So that's why we sometimes make some kind of pilot projects with publishers to prove them that it works. But then it really helps to prevent this.
Okay. Yeah. I had some I think that, we've kind of on regional key management, we've talked a little bit about like what we can do there, right? Prevent cross-border keys, strategic pricing, make sure you're actually taking in all the conditions, market conditions, VAT, taxes, et cetera. But on the promo optimization engine, I'm curious, like what data does it draw from? And why is it optimized? And I think some of the suggestions that I was, as we had talked before, and I was reading on your website would be something like, hey, we instead of doing traditional promotions, like do consistent wholesale pricing, something like that. Don't drop the game 50%, just like drop the game 25% consistently over certain periods of time. And I'm curious because like for somewhere like Steam, where sales are such a big part of driving volume, right? Like 25% off for winter sale, being in those sales, it's like a really big buying moment for most customers. And they mostly buy games that are on sale. And if they're, if you're saying to a client like, hey, don't participate in Steam winter sale at this steep of a price, but maybe you're discounting it somewhere else on another store. How do you guys kind of think through that problem, right? Where you're eliminating maybe the arbitrage opportunity, but you're also potentially decreasing units and distribution because maybe you aren't participating in these really steep sales that Steam may run that are, proven to kind of drive and your game to the top of the charts. And, talk me through that.
Yeah. So when we introduce this optimization system, so you are right. So when the publisher runs the deep promotion on Steam, like 50% off for 1 week, so we are asking for 25%, but for 3 weeks. And why? So we understand that the publisher wants to get the most revenue from Steam, and Steam wants this too, because Steam provides us with the activation keys. And if Steam is not happy with that, so they will not provide us with the keys. So we are fine when Steam runs the promotion with the deepest discount for 1 week. Then it's okay when the publisher provides us with keys with like 25 or 30% discount, but for 3 weeks. And in that case, customers who wanted to buy the game on Steam, he'll buy the game on Steam. But then when it's not a promotion time, so he'll go to like G2A or Ineba or anywhere else, and they can buy a game cheaper than the official price at the moment. So from my perspective, when I play PlayStation games most of the times, and if the game is not on the promotion and it's not a release, I will wait for the promotion. So yeah, and lots of people will do the same. So in PC is almost the same, entirely the same. PC gamers, there's just more like they want to have bigger discounts than console players.
Yeah, totally.
So
honestly,
let's say that.
Honestly, the root of this entire problem is just us. If we just gave the game developer the appropriate price that they charged, all of this would be solved. I'm that idiot that buys the game at $59.99 because I'm like, you know what, they deserve this. I'm on the studio side. I know I want them to buy full price, but so I'm like the person that bought like Split Fiction at $59.99, and then like the next day it went on sale, and I was like, God damn it!
Oh yeah, what's going on?
But all right, continue. Sorry.
Yeah. So and we understand that publishers will anyway. So there will be a reseller who will resell the game cheaper, and they will get lots of keys during the promotion and then resell them outside of Steam. So publisher has already lost their revenue. We just want to get it back. We understand that the game will be the price will be lower than the publisher expects after the promotion ends. So we just ask the publisher to decrease this promotion to get more revenue than they received before that, but for a longer period of time.
Okay, interesting. All right, so that's at least like your ingoing price recommendation system, which is extending sale length period, but maybe not doing as steep of a sale. I think I just want to ask just a general question. I think because a lot of game developers and studios are very concerned about this. And then we'll talk through maybe hopefully like a launch case study. I'd love to talk through a game that you maybe helped launch in 2025 that you can tell me about. But why is protecting your price integrity so important?
So publishers are afraid of losing control and afraid of losing revenue when someone will buy a bulk of keys during the promotion and then resell it. Because this revenue comes not to publisher's pocket, it comes and not to reseller pocket, because usually resellers just add $1 margin and that's it. So that's a discount for the customer. So and when we ask the publisher to decrease the discount, so we ask the publisher to increase their revenue. So I would say it's not easy to believe in that, because many of our publishers, they just think that if we do that, so we will just devalue the game and the game will be like not $49.99, it would be $34.99 for the whole time. But actually it's already 20.99 on the market, and with this solution we ask the publisher not to decrease the value of the game, but decrease the discount and increase the margin and the revenue.
Okay. All right. I think we could go in a long debate on impact from demand on units, but we'll move on to the case study, and then we'll talk a little bit about your business model yourself. But I'd love to have you tell me about a game that you helped launch in 2025, and what you can tell me about it when it came to deploying and actually executing some of these techniques that you said: price optimization, proactive market monitoring, etc.
So in 2024 or 2025, we did have an example of our case study, and I cannot mention the game because that's under NDA. But anyway, so the official price of the game on Steam was $24.99, but the real actual price on the market outside of Steam was $8.69, like 3 times cheaper than it has to be on Steam. So that's a disaster. And so this devalues the game and etc. So what we did? So we advised the publisher to properly region lock the game, to remove New Zealand from the European batch, to little bit increase the price for some particular region, and as the outcome, the price, the market price came to 12 and something. So which means the publisher started to get more revenue, for 25% more revenue, just because of small decisions. And we could not find the whole, uh, the market was full of cheap keys already, which could be
Okay.
sold for 8.69. But what we did with our solution, with our devices, the price increased to 12 and the half, as I remember. And so that's plus 25% of margin from the whole distribution market, from the whole distribution space.
Okay, I see. So this was a game and a game studio that had already launched the game. And so you were kind of like a little bit of like the cleanup crew, where you came in, you were like, oh my goodness, like $8, that's crazy. On Steam is listed at $24.99. Like you're looking at your books, your bank accounts, gross revenues coming in, you're dividing it by units. Somehow that's mapping out to $8. That's crazy.
Yeah, by the way, when we talk about this, when we talk about the prices, and when we talk about $24.99 and $8.69, so we need to understand that so publisher doesn't receive the whole $24.99 from Steam.
Totally,
So
yeah.
they receive.
It's net revenue,
So
yeah.
the VAT is about 20% in the world, and then Steam charges you from 80 to 70%, which means after VAT, the publisher gets not $24.99, they get
Yeah.
they get maybe 13. And so if we increase the price on the market from 8 to almost 13, which means the publisher will get almost the same revenue as he gets from Steam.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, there's just at the blended ASP gross level and the blended ASP net revenue, there's a bunch of different things, and it's very variable by market, for sure, right? I think obviously in Europe you have VAT tax, but in the US you don't, and bunch of other problems there. But so in this situation, you were working with a client after they had already launched the game. Are there any game launches maybe in 2026 and clients that you might be working with that are about to launch? And how are you helping them with, and how are you doing business with them? I think one of the questions that I have is also like, how many launches have you done? And sort of like, what is your business model in all of this?
So so every title which will be released this year through us, we for every title we'll provide our devices, how to region lock keys, and how to set the price. And in most cases, publisher listen to our devices and increase prices. We don't share a lot about this because that's very often that's under NDA and we cannot share this. But in most cases, we ask publishers to properly region lock keys and sometimes increase the price for the release. So the main point here is we cannot do this after the game already announced the price points for all of the regions, because if it's already in place, so we cannot increase the price for some region, or we can just like make a region lock and that's it. So that's why at the beginning of the year, we make a list of all the games and ask the publishers about the price points before they announce them, and ask the publisher to make a region lock and to increase the price for some particular regions.
Okay, got it. And why, why would a publisher not just, we talked a little bit about you have technology that helps you do this and a key management system, et cetera. But what is your business model with the publisher? I guess it's like, they come to you for advice. They're like, help us with address this gray market problem. What does that look like? Like, is it an upfront fixed fee? How are you partnering with the publishers in the sense that you are building an awesome business on top of all of this?
It depends. It depends on the publisher and it depends on their business model. So we usually do not try to break their business model. If the publisher wants to work on the upfront payments, so we will work on the upfront payment with the publisher. If the publisher works with the minimum guarantee, so we'll work under the minimum guarantee with the publisher. If the publisher works on the revenue share, so we will work on the revenue share model. So we understand that. So if we just like break the business model, the current business model will not succeed. So they don't have enough resources to support different business models. If the publisher already has chosen like business model with upfront payments, so okay, we accept that. But in general, most of the publishers, they just provide us with a revenue share.
I see. Okay, got it. I was about to say, so they don't have the flexibility to flex their business model. So you're on the other side flexing your business model.
Yes.
So I bet that's
yes.
that's rather complicated. I mean, I'm sure that your biz ops teams or your finance team is, what were these guys on our deal with us in the first place? Were they the ones that were paying us fixed, or are they the ones that were doing rev share off of? Okay, so that's actually really interesting, actually, that you kind of have this very conformist, let's figure out whatever works best for you. And we're happy to do some combination of variable or fixed pricing or revenue share, regardless, dependent on the publisher. And I think one of the things that I wanted to, before we kind of go into some of our conclusionary steps, is you also, Rokky, as you said, is a key management system. And so they're tracking sort of like what keys were sold, who was the seller, et cetera. But Rokky itself does not sell the keys, right? You kind of load the keys into Rokky and then other sellers tap into those. So just walk me through kind of like, are you in the middleware solution? Just to make sure that for the audience is not confusing that you are the storefront itself.
So we have stores on our side. So we have two B2C websites, and one in China and one is the worldwide. And but our main business is B2B. So our main business is working with e-tailers. And every time when we start working with the publisher, we send the list of e-tailers to the publisher to approve or disapprove it, because that's important for them to control. So if they don't want to work with someone, okay, so that's fine. So just don't work with them. And so we do not sell like lots of keys from our own websites. Maybe 5%, but in most cases we work with B2B clients, with B2B retailers, and we send the list of approved retailers to the publisher.
Right. So I'm the publisher, right? And I'm like, hey, I want to sell through one store in Korea. I want to sell through the China store that you guys have. I want to sell through Steam. I want to sell through these three other groups. And you say, okay, sounds good. Then I, as the publisher, give you the keys, and then you give the keys to those sellers.
No, we upload all the keys on our site. So, and the seller, the e-tailer, has an API integration with us. And yes, and when the customer wants to buy the game. So they send us the request to send me the key. We check the IP address, we check the ID of the client, etc., and we send the key to the customer.
Got it. Okay, interesting. All right. So basically, the customer is still having the same shopping experience they would have if they were, I'm just on Steam myself, but you kind of know these specific keys. If I'm trying to redeem key with the specific hash, that runs through the Rokky API system and then checks a bunch of stuff and then releases the key to Steam.
Yes.
Got it. All right. And so this way, like if I were that bad actor that was trying to go buy a key in Brazil, you would know that I can't, that I'm not allowed to do that.
Technically, we have solutions to prevent this, but as I said, so every time there will be a person who will try to hack you and who will try to find the gap. So we need to fill the gap with the advices just to prevent this, just to make this pointless.
Mm-hmm. And how many retail or digital distributors is Rokky currently? Like, how many APIs do you have for all the different digital distributors, of which I'm sure there's a plethora?
So, I mean, we have like 150 e-tailers, I guess.
Wow.
Who uses our API, and yeah,
that's quite a number. Yeah, I mean, I think that's another thing that's
they're not digital distributors; they're digital e-tailers. So they're digital stores.
Digital stores, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and I think it's an interesting thing. I think for, one of the biggest challenges in games today is just the distribution landscape. And, there's a variety, Steam is obviously the juggernaut of where most PC buying takes place. But, there's a lot of opportunity to disrupt that ecosystem, given different storefronts or digital retailers where you might just get the key and then redeem it on Steam or something like that. And so there's kind of like all of that flow of like, I can redeem keys. I can buy a key from a website, take that key, and put it into Steam. I get the game, but I didn't buy it from Steam. And I think that's a really interesting landscape and strategy. And it's also very, region specific, as there's multiple different storefronts that are just, country based to some extent. And so 150 people is certainly a lot of storefronts and retail sellers to manage. I'm sure that's also fairly complicated on your side. And we probably could talk about that forever, but we're coming up on the end of our episode here, and I kind of wanted to ask kind of a conclusionary question that's more in the line of distribution in general. Like, I think Valve for a lot of people is the elephant in the room, and so many of the issues stem from developers and their dependency on Valve for the majority of their income and distribution strategy. That, as well as discoverability. And so you did this like 300 plus studio study with PC game developers that helped identify, this problem really astutely. 75% of studios said that 80% plus of their revenue or something like that is coming from Steam. And like, I guess what do you do? And like, what do you think should be done about Valve? And do you think that Valve makes like the PC gray market worse?
I think that Valve make great contribution to the market. They changed the market significantly. So they introduced their Steam activation codes like in 2012, I guess, or 2011, and they changed the market. And they made so lots of publishers and lots of developers, they started to get revenue from their games because of Steam. And that's great. So that's thanks Steam for that. So absolutely. So just what we want to do with Steam. So we want Steam to introduce the silent key activation. As we started this conversation today, so I told that the funny fact is we still use activation codes, which were printed on the CD boxes like 30 years ago. So the market needs the silent key activation system, and Steam can introduce it, and we can support this, and this will prevent lots of gray hacks, lots of gray stuff. And of course, there will be a person who will try to hack this again. But anyway, so that will be another question. And for now, I believe the market is ready to implement the silent key activation system.
Okay. Interesting. All right. So Steam, implement the silent key activation system.
Yeah, come to us so we can help you with that. So we can support you here as well.
Awesome. So look, Vadim, it was such a pleasure. And there's clearly a lot of opportunity. This is, I think, a really interesting space. And as you said, like very misunderstood by a lot of publishers and developers. If anybody in our show wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
So just email me like a@rokky.com or come to our website rokky.com and there is a form for you. So just connect us. And
Very
don't
awesome.
be afraid of distribution. So the distribution, that's a great space for revenue. So you can get 20% more revenue just start using the distribution space.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's really exciting. It's just, I think it's about discoverability and finding and matching the right buyers to the right stuff. But anyway, this was such a pleasure. As always, guys, if you have feedback or ideas, please hit me up at alexandra@naavik.co. I am always open. And with that, we're out. That's our episode for today. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much, Vadim, for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@naavik.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Naavik has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.naavik.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Naavik Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.naavik.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.